Everybody, it's Jenny Clark with Solvability, and we've got another session at GovCon Summit. Today, we're talking all day about CMMC and cybersecurity and how it impacts small business. I've been talking to Veronica Baginski of Nudge on this several times, and she agreed to be part of this panel today to talk about what she's looking at, what you need to be aware of. And I'm just going to turn it over to Veronica. Veronica, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Nudge when you start, and then take it away.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Today, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of education about CMMC and NIST. And just to get started, my name is Veronica Baginski. I am the Sales and Marketing Director for Nudge Systems. Been in this role for quite a while now, and excited to give you guys some info to take back to your teams and help you support you on your road to compliance. So I'm going to share my screen, and we are going to get started. Okay, and my contact information is on the first slide and also on the last slide. So if you can't grab it, that's all right. But like I said, we've been doing this for, Nudge was incorporated back in 2018. So I've been doing this for a little bit of for a while now, and we are having lots of great developments, lots of great things happening at Nudge. So if anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to talk to your team about this presentation in general, how Nudge can support you guys, and just any type of cybersecurity questions. This is about getting the small business community compliant and ensuring that everyone can meet those requirements when the auditors are ready to go and get people certified. So just a little bit about us. So how we got started. So Metal Ops is a program management and engineering company that had a NIST contract. I started working for Metal Ops back in July of 2018. So this was a little bit before my time, but they had a contract with NIST. And so like many contractors out there, Metal Ops had the letter that came out in January of 2017 saying, hey, you need to get to compliance by December, which Metal Ops was able to do. And my boss, Katie, was working with lots of entities, and she attended as many events as she could. And really at the time, there just wasn't a ton of information out there. So we went to every event we could think of, talked to as many people as we possibly could. And what we realized is that there was no comprehensive tool or support system for small businesses to get to compliance. There was no like pathway that succinctly outlined what you needed to do in order to get to compliance. So her husband, Mark, started Pacesetter Operations Group, and with an IT team, we developed and created Nudge. So Nudge is a program management tool to help attain and maintain CMMC and NIST compliance. And it allows you to document all the components of compliance that you need in order to pass an audit. So today is really about education in NIST and CMMC. And I will go into a little bit about Nudge and how it will support you. But today I really want to make sure that everyone has all of their education questions answered, and we can move forward from there. Just a little bit of an agenda. So this is what we're going to be talking about: NIST, CMMC, what it is, compliance components, expectations, what to look out for, do so compare and contrast, because there's a lot of confusion between the two. And then review today's compliance expectations, some clauses to look for, and some next steps. But just a couple things to keep in mind while we're going through this is cybersecurity is not optional. If there is some conversation in your company saying, oh, this is going to change, this is going to go away, it's too expensive, and small businesses just won't be able to afford it, so the government has to get rid of it, that's just absolutely not true. There was an article that came out, I believe in Defense News or the Fed Scoop, that said the President Biden and his team is looking at CMMC, because right now, CMMC, cybersecurity, this is top priority for the new presidential groups. They are looking at this as this is a security issue, a national security issue. The number 2 requirements or expectations under President Biden is cybersecurity, right behind coronavirus. He put in $650 million into the coronavirus package that was recently passed. The DHS just put $25 million into grants for helping small businesses become compliant. So this is a top of mind for the new administration. This is not something that's going away. Cybersecurity needs to be part of your company culture. When you go through these requirements and you're putting all these policies together and documentation, yes, you'll pass an audit, and that's really great. But the problem is that if you create all these policies and then no one follows them, it really kind of defeats the purpose. If you create a policy that says everyone has to have double factor authentication to access their email, and someone downloads their email on their phone, you now have a problem. So just making sure that this is part of a company culture. This is not a check the box. This is something that needs to be embraced every day, because even if you don't do business with the government, you still have intellectual property you want to protect. And this is something that other industries are looking to adopt into just because of the intensity behind the security system, and they know it will protect them. And like I said, cybersecurity is not about checklists. It's not about checking the box. It's about showing that you guys are currently doing this. You're actively doing this. You're actively participating in it. And that cybersecurity is here to stay. It's not going away. There might be a handful of changes, but at the end of the day, this is something that you must complete. So getting a start on it now is going to be a lot better than starting a year from now when all of your competitors were getting to compliance in that time frame. So let's start with NIST. So NIST started back in 2003, and there's been multiple revisions. And the revision that most people are familiar with is the January 2017 issue, where they issued that 2017 deadline of everyone needs to be compliant. So what does it actually say? Per the DFARS clause 252-204-7012, which is the NIST clause, a defense contractor must be compliant to all 110 requirements to win and continue to do work with the government if they work with CUI data. Those are the two pieces of information. You need to be compliant to all 110 if you work with CUI data. So the prime on this contract is responsible for the supply chain compliance. So if you have a contract that says, I have this NIST clause in here, I need to have all these pieces of this contract completed, and there's a couple suppliers that don't need to see CUI data. They don't need to recognize it on the drawings. Their contribution to this particular contract is strictly a COTS item or something really, really simple. That supplier does not need to be NIST compliant. However, if you do have someone who sees CUI data on a drawing or things of that nature, that supplier has to be compliant. And it's up to the prime to ensure that everyone is compliant. It is the prime's responsibility. So if you are sending this work out to people and you're not ensuring your supply chain is fully compliant, you as the prime can be held responsible. So what does compliance require? The first thing is a gap assessment, which is your current security posture, where you're at today with all 110 requirements. The next one is a plan of action and milestones, which is a document showing your deficiencies and the remediation timeline, as well as the actions. So putting together, okay, this is where I'm not compliant. This is how I'm getting to compliance at this time frame. Then you have your system security plan, which is the final overview and execution of the policy. So everything that you are compliant to in your gap assessment, you would pull that information into your system security plan and ensure that it shows how you're meeting those compliance standards. So at this point in time, it was a self-attesting to compliance. It was, yes, when the government asked me, I can say yes, and we're good to go. They might ask for a piece of documentation or two, but there really was not a serious checks and balance system to ensure that the defense contracting industry or the groups really were meeting these standards. So what changed is the NIST supplement back in September of 2020. And what the supplement came out and said is that there is now a NIST assessment methodology score. And what that score does, it allows the government to understand the implementation of NIST within the defense industry. So it allows them to understand how many requirements people are actually adhering to, and how many of the requirements are in a plan of action and milestones. So how it works is you start at a score of 110 and it goes down to a negative 203. There really is not a right or wrong answer when it comes to a score. Like, you're not going to see a contract out there that says, hey, you must have a score of this, or at least there isn't today when this is being recorded. So that's really how it works, is you start at your 110, and for every requirement that you're not compliant to, you subtract the value of that particular requirement. And there's tons of free resources online to help you calculate that score. And there's three kinds of assessments. There's the basic assessment, which is, hey, I'm the defense contractor. I'm going to calculate my own score. And I'm going to put it into the system. And then there's a medium or a high assessment, which is completed by the government. Why this is really important is because if you are audited with a medium or a high assessment and you score a 70 or higher, your CMMC certification will only be on the remaining practices that you didn't get certified to. So it's really a cost-effective way to help you get to CMMC compliance without actually having to go through the whole process of getting CMMC certified. So you can't like call somebody to say, hey, audit me. But if you do get audited, it's a really great opportunity for your company to save money on your CMMC certification. So all of this information had to be documented and put into the Supplier Performance Risk System, also known as SPRS, and that had to be done by November 30th of 2020. You didn't have your score in there at that time, you could not win new work. So that's a key piece there. If you don't have it in there today, you cannot win new work. So if you guys plan on continuing to get business from the government, the score needs to be in place today. What's key about this score is that when the score is entered, you are legally attesting that this is your cybersecurity posture. And if there's an audit that shows a significant discrepancy between what you put in the system versus what you're audited, you could potentially face a False Claims Act violation, which is jail and fines. So this needs to be taken very seriously. If you don't think you're compliant to these particular requirements, don't give yourself the points. It's far better to put in a lower score and then show as you continue to adapt to these requirements that you are increasing your score, you're increasing your cybersecurity posture. So the thing about this is that there was a lot of conversation in the marketplace, but when you win those contracts with the NIST score in there, you're attesting that you're NIST compliant. So if you are putting this information, if you're signing that contract that says, hey, this has a NIST clause in here, I'm compliant, you need to be able to prove it. And this SPURS score was the government's way of understanding, okay, how many people are truly getting to the 110 score? How many truly are implementing all these requirements we really want them to do? So when they put these scores in there, like I said, you can't win new work. The government does have the right to award a contract to a higher priced product if they think it's worth the value of the higher cybersecurity posture that that company has. So if you're bidding on a contract that's the lowest price technically acceptable, and somebody comes in at a slightly higher price, and then your cybersecurity posture is at like a 20, and then theirs is at a 50, they can make the determination, hey, because they're doing more stuff for cybersecurity, I'm going to pay the extra money for this product. So it's worth your time to get to the 110, and it also will help you on your CMMC process, your roadmap. But that is something government does have the right to do based on this supplement. And the supplement is linked on our website, nudgesystems.com, if you want to read it. So NIST, a couple things to look out for. Details are your friend. They save you lots of time and money. If you are ever audited, you need to show proof. You need to show evidence. So the more detail you can document today in a plan of action and milestones or a system security plan, the better for you. So don't say, oh, it's an overview, I just have to document a sentence or two. Take the time and put it all together in one place that's easily accessible, that's easily labeled, that makes sense, that when you go to an audit, you remember what you put. See, NIST changes, the requirements are updated. So there are usually a huge press release that comes out and says, hey, the requirements change, this is what they're going to look like, they'll be implemented on this time frame. So you do need to check for the updates. The gap assessment, if you are going to hire someone to do a gap assessment for you, ask for a sample of their work. And the reason why is because, unfortunately, there's lots of companies out there that come in and say, okay, I'm going to do a gap assessment. And I don't want to say lots, that's probably a gross exaggeration, but there are companies out there that come in, take the gap assessment, and answer yes or no to the questions. And while that technically satisfies the requirement, it doesn't really help you as a small business, because now that information, in theory, if it was answered correctly with complete sentences and evidence behind it, you can now not pull that information into your poem, into your SSP. You can't take that information and use it to further get to the compliance. With yes or no questions, it's basically saying, yes, I checked the box and I have a gap assessment, but it really doesn't add a ton of value to your cybersecurity posture and your roadmap. So the plan of action and milestones, make sure the dates are realistic. So if you put a date behind what you're going to do, make sure you achieve that. And the reason why is that if you change that date, that date still needs to remain in your documentation. So if you said, hey, next week I'm going to buy this server and I'm going to update it to meet the requirements, then next week comes along and you didn't do it, you still need to leave that date in your POAM and then add a new date for when you are going to get to compliance. So you will need to make sure they're realistic, because you don't want an auditor or someone coming in questioning why you put all these dates in here and then you weren't able to meet them. Your system security plan. Make sure that when you're going through this process or you hire someone to do this process, that the guidelines are utilized often. And there's a really key reason why. When you go through your gap assessment and you're answering the questions, there's this misconception in the marketplace that the gap assessment is really like your key to getting to compliance for your system security plan. It's like this complete overview or next step process, like, oh, I answered this question, yes, I use passwords, so that's must be what I need to document in my system security plan, that I use passwords, and here's how I do it. But when you read the guidelines, they have objectives in them, and those are the objectives that you have to achieve to be considered compliant for those requirements. And this is a real life example that happened to a client of ours. They answered the question on the gap assessment that said, the question was control the flow of CUI in accordance with approved authorizations. That's the only question on the gap assessment for NIST 3.1.3. Most people, when they read that, they say, oh, control the flow of CUI. Yeah, I use encrypted email. That's how I transfer data between my team, their team, etc. And so if you just record, oh, I just use encrypted email, you think you're good to go. But when you actually look at the guidelines, there's a significant discrepancy for what everything that needs to be recorded. So these objectives that come straight from the guidelines, you can see there's 5 of them. 4 of the 5 talk about encrypted email. They talk about that flow of CUI. But when you read the 3rd one, it's talking about the designated sources and destinations, i.e. networks, individuals, devices. So can you access social media on your VPNs? Can people just go to any website that's not trusted or secured? Can people access CUI on any of their devices, their tablets, their phones, their laptops, things like that? So you need to be able to establish in your system security plan, based on this NIST requirement, that yes, I control the flow of CUI data by creating this framework. And you can see the examples below, creating this framework that doesn't allow traffic to come in to my system from a Facebook page, or allows, I can't access my, shopping list on my favorite website online, and somebody can enter through my shopping cart and get into my email. Do you have the ability to report a phishing email, and then that email gets deleted from your system so it doesn't accidentally get clicked on? So when you read these guidelines, these objectives are your key to understanding what needs to be done in your system security plan. And if it's not there, then put in your plan of action and milestones. So that's why the guidelines are so important. So that is the summation really of NIST. Does anybody have any questions before we go to the CMMC?
Veronica, I think you're covering it very well. I would just keep rolling. It's almost like it's overwhelming. So keep going.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. If you guys have any questions, like I said, if you want me to come in and do this presentation for your team, I'm most happy to do that, completely complimentary. Like I said, this is about education and getting people on the same page. So CMMC. So what is CMMC? It's a cybersecurity maturity model. The maturity is the key word in this name. And the reason why is because the framework is built upon itself. So each level, levels 1 through 5, are built upon themselves. So if you are looking towards level 1, you're going to get to the 17 practices. Level 2 is 55 additional practices to get you to a total of 72. Level 3 is 58, get you to a total of 130. So it's built upon itself to establish this maturity framework. Also, the maturity means this time frame that existed. So I got to a level 1, or I got to a level 2, and I had those implemented in my system for a long period of time. I can show evidence. I can show it works. These practices come from lots of different places, the FAR, different NIST requirements, things like that. And what's key here is that level 3 includes all 110 NIST requirements. So the government recognizes that there is definitely not a need for everyone to be compliant to all 110 practices. And that's one of the reasons why the NIST DoD methodology score was so important, because it allows the government to say, okay, these contractors are really not meeting the requirements and they're showing that there are lower scores. And that's okay, because those contractors can support contracts that don't necessarily have CUI data in them, and they can still participate. And CMMC is different in the sense that you have to go through a formal certification process. So the CMMC accreditation body has put together this training material for all these different types of titles, and there's certified and non-certified consultants, and you can go online and read all of those different types of accreditations. But the key one is the C3PAO. That is the person who actually gives you your certification paperwork. So that's the key phrase to remember there. And the other piece is that you need to be certified prior to bidding. So with NIST, you could go and bid on any contract you wanted, and as long as you got to award, and they said, hey, are you NIST certified? And you can attest to that, you're good to go. Now you need to put into SPURS your score before you can win in something, but it can be done at award. So anyone who's familiar with the award process, it could be upwards of a year, 2 years, depending on what you're working on. So there was a lot of time that was given. With CMMC, there's not a lot of time. It's, hey, contracts are out, there's CMMC requirements in it, you better have your paperwork. And there's also, there's no plan of action milestones. This is pass or fail. There's no, oh, I'll get to that next year when I have more money, or, oh, I'll adapt this. No, it's strictly, this is what you need to be doing. And the levels are listed in the RFI, RFQ stages. So again, highlighting that point that this needs to be done prior to bidding. You cannot be trying to get to compliance, trying to get to your certification, and then, you know, bid on it beforehand. And then the key phrase here is also FCI and CUI data. So FCI is for levels 1 through 2, CUI is levels 3 through 5. So FCI is information that not necessarily needs to be protected, but it's something that's sensitive. So like a email for a contracting officer, or, you know, things of that nature, something that could be found out, but you have to go through a lot of effort and work to get to there. CUI is that controlled unclassified information that everyone really wants protected. So there's 2 websites there. I'm going to give you guys a minute to jot those down. Those really do go into a lot of detail about CUI, what it looks like, what to look out for, and just to, you know, kind of get your team familiar with those markings. So those are 2 really great resources there. And a couple things too is that COTS does not require CMMC certification. So if people are not unfamiliar, COTS is commercially off-the-shelf products. Those are things that you can, you know, buy that are pretty familiar, or, you know, that are developed, that are pretty familiar. So if you do that for the government and that's the source that you give, you do not need to have a CMMC certification. However, if there is any modification to that COTS item, you do need a CMMC certification. So if you take that COTS item and you modify it or change it in any way, you do need a CMMC certification. So if you guys do provide that for the government, be sure to go back to your team and understand, is it strictly like I'm supplying hardware, or are you taking that hardware and you're making changes to fit a drawing or fit a specification? So I'm going to go to the next slide, which is the newest piece of information. So what does a CMMC audit look like? Well, there's 3 ways to assess. So assessors will come in and they will review your information. And there's 3 ways that they assess if you have the accurate documentation or not. It's a test, interview, or a C. So an example, I use encrypted email. Okay, they can interview your employee and say, okay, Mr. Engineer, I need to understand how you communicate CUI or receive CUI. Oh, I use encrypted email. I'm just going to say Prevail because that's the one I use. We use Prevail. Okay, cool. Now I need you to show me how you log in Prevail, and I need you to send me a dummy CUI data. And then they have to go in, log into their portal, and, you know, send the information. That's 2 ways that they can see that, yes, I interviewed somebody and I tested it. Okay, we're good to go. Then they have to document that. 2 of them have to be documented to record it, have to be completed to record that this piece of information is accurately done. So if you said, hey, I am the, you know, I use encrypted email, and you can show it, but you didn't document that appropriately, then you can't pass the audit. If they can say, you know, I can visually see this framework that you built in this picture of the hierarchy of how information is transferred, and then you can test it, then okay, that will help you pass an audit. So there's a lot of documentation that needs to happen. It's not just simply filling out a system security plan with, yep, I use Prevail. You need to show that documentation. You need to show pictures of, you know, how something might be transferred. And I'm just giving examples. You guys can show the evidence however you want, but just to kind of get everyone understanding that this is not simply I read a system security plan, I read your bullet points, and you're good to go. This is a very intense, detailed procedure. People are interviewed. You need to get your team to understand this and go through this process. So this can't be something that you guys just implemented yesterday. This is something that needs to be established over a long period of time. And that's one of the key reasons why an interview process is so important, because let's be honest, if you got compliant yesterday, then an auditor walks in, the chances of you being able to demonstrate that through an interview is going to be pretty hard to, you know, go through like, oh yeah, we got compliant yesterday. After you go through this process, you have a grace period to remediate anything that happens. So this is a really gray area. So don't use this as a safety net. Definitely look at this as like a little added bonus if something little tiny goes wrong, because again, there's a ton of gray area. So the grace period is typically 90 days, and it's for minor issues. What does that mean? It's up to the assessor to decide. So there's no legal definition that says minor issues include this, that, and the other thing. It could be like including you're missing a small piece of evidence, like if you document that my leadership is responsible for ensuring that our supply chain is compliant. Well, who is leadership? Oh, well, it's the CEO and the VP of operations. You didn't write that, you wrote leadership. So that would be like a small piece of evidence. But again, this grace period is like your little savior if something ever did happen during this audit. Do not count on this. Take the time, take the effort to ensure that everything is put in place, because you definitely don't want to be going through this, because one, it's super intense, takes you out of your job to get you through this process, and three, it's crazy expensive and you definitely don't want to be wasting money. So another key piece is that in order to get to a level 3, if that's what you're trying to attain, you must meet levels 1 and 2 compliance before you can get to level 3 certification. So what does that mean? If you have everything in level 3, all those 58 practices, I believe, they're good to go. They're all documented. They're ready to pass an audit. But then there's something in level 2. There's a couple of them that you're just like, hey, we just didn't really put in the effort. And an auditor comes in or assessor comes in and says, hey, everything in level 1 is good to go. And everything in level 3 is good to go, but you missed a ton of stuff in level 2. They will only allow you to get a level 1 certification. So again, we're back to that maturity. We're back to that stepping stones. We're back to that, building upon itself. So take levels 1 and 2 very seriously when it comes to the documentation, so that you have the opportunity to get to the level 3 if that's what your company is going for. So assessor needs. So this is again from a C3 PAO who's in training. This is the information they gave me, is that if you're going for level 1, you're going to need to hire one assessor. If you're going for level 2, you're probably going to need 2. And if you're going for level 3, you need 3 or 4 assessors. So an example that this C3 PO gave me was, okay, you have one building, you're trying to go for level 3, and there's roughly 15 employees-ish. You would need 3 assessors, and that will take you roughly 2 weeks. Or 240 billable hours. So if you do the math on that, it can get pretty pricey. So you want to make sure that you have everything in a row. You have all your ducks in a row, because the last thing you want to be doing is sitting there with an auditor going, oh, let me find that. And then that's just more money you're going to pay as they're sitting there as you're trying to find all this documentation. So make sure everything is fluid, seamless, and good to go. So a couple things to look out for CMMC. Again, details are your friend, and I just explained why. You want to have as much detail up front so that if anyone asks a question or needs a piece of evidence, you have it ready there, and you don't have to go through, again, more than 240 hours to get through an assessment. You also have to check for the updates to the practices. So just like NIST, CMMC is updated. So they, again, will issue press releases and things like that saying, hey, this is what's changing. Here's the revisions. This will be active at this time frame. So if anyone's familiar with CMMC, they're familiar with Katie Arrington, who's leading the charge on all of this at a federal level. She has been quoted during the town halls that levels 1 through 3 are set. So if there's any misconceptions out there that, oh, CMMC is going to change, they're going to change the requirements, they're going to make them easier, they're going to do this, levels 1 through 3 are pretty much set in stone. Levels 4 and 5 are still being debated. They're still coming out with some more information about it. So those will change, but those are very, very rare. So if there's somebody in your leadership team or somebody on your team saying, hey, we should wait, don't wait. Take the time now, get to compliance, and put in the effort. With CMMC, it's a 3-year certification. So this is really important because it can help you get a certification quickly and then get to and save money in year 1, but then balance finances in year 2. So here's an example. So let's say you get to compliance and you're trying to go through the certification process, but when you actually look at your documentation, you might not be able to get to level 3. So in order to remain competitive, you can hire assessors and you can get to a level 2 certification just to keep you competitive, just to give you some type of CMMC certification to go after bids. So in year 1, you get to a level 2 certification. Year 2, you said, okay, I put in the time, I got my level 3 information ready to go. I'm going to get certified to a level 3. You only need to get certified on the practices that you didn't get certified to previously. So as opposed to sitting down with an auditor and go through a level 3 certification and get certified to all 130 practices, you could in year 1 sit down and say, okay, I'm going to get certified to 72 practices. And then in year 2, I'm going to get certified to the remaining 58 practices. And then that can help balance the cost between what year 1 and then year 2. And then that level 3 status is valid for the remaining 2-year cycle of that 3-year cycle. So it's an interesting way to look at it if there is some issues internally, if you can't get to that certification level. Levels 4 and 5 are very, very rare. We're talking less than 1% of the defense contractors in the United States are going to have to go through levels 4 and 5. They're so rare that the government's actually debating whether or not they'll pay for certain companies to get to that levels 4 and 5, because they understand that the practices are pretty intense and it's very expensive to get there. So again, I like to highlight that if you are audited on NIST and you score 70 or higher, your CMMC certification will be on the remaining practices. So again, don't be afraid of a NIST audit. It can be your best friend. It can save you lots of time and energy and lots of money for your company. So as of today, you cannot get certified. So if people are reaching out to you saying, hey, I can get you this, I can get you this, you cannot get your certification papers today. The C3POs are not fully trained. If you have people reaching out to you and they're talking about this, I'm verified by this, I have all these great titles, everything can be verified on the cmmcab.org website. All of those people are in there. So all you have to do is search a company's name and it'll pop up exactly what certifications they have and what they mean. So it's a really great checks and balances system. There is a company out there that's saying the name of their company is like CMMC something, and it's a company that just chose a really interesting name, and it gives the impression that they're a CMMC accredited company or they're somehow associated with CMMC, but reality, they're just a consultant, and that's completely legal. They can totally do that. But again, it's a great checks and balances for you to come in and verify their information on the CMMC AB. So as a quick recap, this is a great compare and contrast, but one thing I did want to point out is that you can recoup these costs in your overhead and G&A. So when you're sitting down with your team, make sure finance is included, because they're going to understand how these costs can be recouped in your pricing model. So NIST was a self-attestment. With CMMC, it's an actual certification by a third party. NIST, you need to be compliant to all 110 requirements, while with CMMC, it's different levels. NIST has a plan of action and milestones, so you can create those timeframes and milestones behind what you need to do. CMMC, there's no plan of action and milestones, pass or fail. NIST, you need to register your NIST methodology score in SPURS every 3 years. And CMMC, you need to get recertified every 3 years by a certified auditor. And a key piece with that as well is that your SPURS score, you can change that as often as you want. So if you come in on January 1st, 2021, and you put a score in there, then you can, you would update that in 2024, January. But in May, you said, okay, I made a bunch of changes. My score is drastically improved. I'm going to come in and change it. That score is now valid of May 2021 all the way through May of 2024. So that's like a rolling 3 years. So just something to keep in mind, that you can update that as many times as you want. And then NIST affects any contractor with CUI data, where CMMC affects all contractors with CUI and FCI data. CMMC will be in every contract by 2026. So there is a time frame where CMMC is going to be everywhere. So that's just something to keep in mind when you guys are looking at this from a timeline perspective and building it into your business model. So what's required today? NIST, you need your gap assessment, your plan of action milestones, your system security plan, put your score into SPURS. Those are the 4 things you need. CMMC, to get to that place where you can be ready for an audit, you need to take your plan of action milestones, you need to close it out. Then you need to take your system security plan and look and plan it for your targeted level. So if you're going for a level 3, make sure level 1 is good to go. Make sure level 2 is good to go. And make sure level 3 is good to go. And then you need to hire an auditor and then get your certification papers. So that is what's required today. And here are some clauses to look out for. So these are 4 clauses that are going to pertain to you when it comes to cybersecurity. So the first one is the 7012. That's the one that says, hey, if you have NIST in your contract, you handle CUI, you have to make sure that those people are NIST compliant, which is, again, those 3 pieces of documentation. If you have 7019 in your contract, that says the one where you need to enter your score into SPURS. Now, if you have a contract with 7012, check for an amendment, because 7019, chances are it came out back in September-ish, November-ish timeframe. And so if you haven't checked for that, be sure that you see that. The 7020, that's the one that says the basic assessment is required, which is, again, putting your score in disperse. In this clause, you are also signing off that the government can come in at any time and do an audit. So just letting you know that that's how you're attesting that a government can come in and audit you to make sure you're doing what you're doing. Again, can't stress this enough. If you get to 70 or higher from an audit, your CMMC is going to be a lot cheaper and a lot less time consuming. For CMMC, it's a 7021. That's the one that says CMMC is required. And that means that a level 1 is the minimum. If there's anything above and beyond that, then they will disclose it in the RFI, RFQ. So those are the 4 clauses you want to look out for. The nice part is that it's 19, 20, and 21, so it keeps it pretty simple. Oh, and also 21 is transposed as 12. So it's a pretty easy numbering system to remember. So next steps, okay, look at your contracts, check for these clauses, check sections K, L, and M, check your T's and C's, and check your siege rules. So even though your NIST clause might not be in your sections K, L, and M with all the other wonderful clauses that you need to be compliant to, it can be in your T's and C's and it can be in your siege rules. So make sure you check all 5 of those places. Then if you do have that, do you actually have CUI data? If you're the prime, do you transfer that information over to your sub? So if you're a sub and you want to know if this affects you, call your prime and say, hey, does this contract have a 7012 and does it have NIST requirements in it? So you as a sub, do your due diligence because you want to be there for your prime. You want to continue to win work with these people. The last thing you need is that prime to come in and get audited, then you get audited, and oh, by the way, you're not compliant. So check for the CUI clause. Do you have the CUI data in there? And then what are you currently doing for cybersecurity? So if you don't have the NIST clauses in there, you don't handle CUI data, what are you currently doing for cybersecurity? Is there anything that you guys are doing to limit the exposure that an intruder can come in, a hacker can come in and take your information? Roughly 40% of small businesses get hacked. Of those 40%, 60% declare bankruptcy in less than 6 months. So it's important to ensure your information is protected. There's intellectual property. You have your employees' information, their names, phone numbers, social security numbers. You want to make sure all this stuff is protected, as a company. So ensure that there's something you guys can be doing to ensure those things are protected. So next, talk to your leadership and your IT team. Get them in the same room saying, hey, listen, CMMC is coming down the pipeline. We do or don't have NIST. We need to figure out a game plan because we need to remain competitive. Understand how much of your business really depends on defense. Because if you're doing 5 or 6%, maybe this isn't worth it to you. But a lot of companies out there, it's 50, 60, 70% of their business. So you want to make sure that you can still remain competitive and remain able to bid on these things because that is your business model. That's how you developed everything. So get everyone in the same room and really talk about what you're doing and what you could be doing and get a roadmap put together. If you have questions, talk to your partners in the industry because you are not the only ones having this conversation. Talk to them and say, hey, what are you guys doing to get to compliance? Are you using consultants? Do you use the software? Is there great webinars you can send my way? And speaking of webinars, there's tons of webinars. There's tons of town halls. Nudge is hosting a webinar at the end of the month with this really great company, Endeavor. If you go on nudgesystems.com or you go on Nudge Systems LinkedIn profile, be sure to follow us and you'll receive all that wonderful information. But the webinar is going to be great because, again, we're going to go through this presentation and then we're also going to offer financing opportunities for companies who need financial support to get to compliance, but don't necessarily have the credit or whatever it may be to do all that stuff. So our company that we're working with, Endeavor, out in California, is going to be able to talk more to that. And if you really, really need a lot of help for somebody to come in and break it down, you can call me. I am more than happy to have this conversation with anyone in your company, anyone on your team, any of your partners. At the end of the day, this is about getting everyone compliant and everyone on the same page. But a couple things. So how can Nudge help you? So again, Nudge is a program management tool. It is not something you can purchase and, oh, you're compliant. It's a program management tool. It's a one location. It's one format to document your cybersecurity compliance. It has an easy to navigate dashboard with the implementation progress that you guys are doing. And it also shows you your most current SPURS score. So this allows you to enter that information into the system. It has all of the current NIST and CMMC practices and requirements, so you never have to monitor any of those changes. It also comes with pre-built-in standards. So we took the objectives, broke them down to give you actionable steps of how you need to get to compliance or what you need to do. We also have all the references and all of the guidelines broken down per requirement and practice. So if you have a question, it's a simple click of a button and give you all the information you need on that one specific requirement. We have compliance reports for both a GAP, POAM, and an SSP. So it's a really simple plug and play. You need to do a simple print. There you go. There's your report. And it's the most up-to-date information in the system. You can manage one format across multiple companies and multiple buildings. So if you own 2 defense contracting companies, if you have 5 different buildings, it's one format across all of those places. It also allows you to document all the deficiencies that you have and demonstrate improvement. So when an auditor comes in and they say, okay, it shows that you got compliant back in, 5, 6, 7 months ago. And where's your evidence? Oh, here's the evidence. Here are the changes I made. Here are the weaknesses I documented. And it shows that you guys are not just doing it today. You have been doing it. You're currently doing it, and you implemented it for the future. It can show that history of your cyber implementation. It can show the tasks that you guys have completed and put forth to ensure that you are doing the right thing by NIST and CMMC standards. So this is, again, my contact information. And if you go on nudgesystems.com/demo, there is a link to a little short video of how Nudge works. So you guys can take a look at that. And if you have any questions, that's my cell phone number. More than happy to talk to anyone about any of these topics.
Wow, thanks so much, Veronica. What you've given us is a better idea of how extensive this is. And I've got some questions for you. So I'm going to unshare your screen.
Okay.
And let's see if we can set it up so everybody can see. I don't know why it's not doing that. There we go.
Okay, perfect.
So I'm just going to put everybody in gallery view, because if you guys want to put on your cameras, I think it helps to have these conversations. But I wrote down 6 things.
Okay.
The first thing I wrote down is you mentioned False Claims Act. And unlike a regular company, if you're a government contractor, whether a prime contractor or a subcontractor to a prime, where there's flow down, False Claims Act means you mess up and you could end up in jail. You're certainly going to be investigated and by different levels of people. So it's huge, huge risk. So this to me is one of those things. Are you sure you want to be in federal contracting? Because if you're just dabbling, get out. It's going to cost too much money. That's just Jenny's thought. The second one, primes will drop you like a hot potato. Prime contractors are very, very risk averse, because you mentioned, Veronica, that they are responsible for their subcontractors. Well, just like anything else, if I have a problem in my family, I avoid that person. I find a way to cut them out, because I can't be responsible for their actions. So if a prime contractor has a choice to do business with a company that's very good, but not CMMC compliant and not caring, I'm dropping them. I can't afford the risk. That decision will be made at a very low level, probably by the program manager, but it'll be reinforced, because when you get the reps and certs, the representations and certifications from your primes, the ones that say, do you have do this, do you have this, and are you DCAA compliant? Are you DCAA approved? Have you been audited? The same questions will come up from about the CMMC. And so many companies are going to run into a situation where it will not be clear who the real auditor is and how you get it. There's also going to be a scramble to get approved. And it's going to be like everything else. You're going to be, well, we would be approved, but we can't get our auditor to come in. Well, exactly. No excuses. That will not be accepted. You will be dropped by a prime contractor like that. And they're going to do it across the board. And this is why our defense industrial base is at such a threat. The cost is being slammed into small business, and it's very hard for them to recover.
Right.
Another important
and also, Jen, if I might add to that, this is the perfect opportunity for you to use this as your competitive advantage. If you offer great pricing, on-time delivery, you can do the job and you can do it well. The only thing standing between you and your competitors is a handful of minor little bullet points. Get to compliance, because one, they're going to trust you more. You are going to get more work than your competitors because you can say, yep, I'm NIST compliant and I can prove it. And they're going to appreciate that like nobody can appreciate you otherwise. And you can say, hey, I did the right thing. You can trust me with your work. You can trust me because I can prove myself over and over again. And when those requirements drop and they say, hey, this is the line in the sand, I need your certification papers, and you can show that, you now have this opportunity, this little window where you said, hey, I did the right thing on time. I got my papers on time. And now you're going to be winning so much work. You're going to be, I need to expand. I need to hire more people. I need to get a new building. I need more tools. I need more this, because you're just going to have so much work because no one is going to be doing what you are doing. That's the key piece here. That's why the education piece is so important. Like, get people to understand, like, hey, this isn't going away. This is the line in the sand. So use this to your advantage. Use this as an opportunity to say, hey, yep, the investment's high. $50,000, $100,000. I'm not sure where you guys are at, but if you can invest that small amount, it's going to compound into millions of dollars worth of work because no one else is going to be competing like you're competing. So just wanted to add that, Jenny.
Well, and that's a really good point. The other thing is, you also mentioned that you can get with your finance people and make sure these costs are included. Well, here's the deal. Yes, just like ISO certification, your facility security clearance, management, all of that, it's part of your overhead and G&A rates. It's always been allowable cost. And one of the things that came out early was Katie Arrington said it's going to be allowable. Absolutely, it's going to be allowable. It would never, under any circumstances, be considered unallowable cost. But here's the deal. Small businesses are mostly working fixed price and time and material. So that cost may be in your rates, but you're not going to get paid for it because it's going to come out of your profit because you had a fixed billing rate. And that's my biggest concern. This is very, I know we need to be DCA compliant, but this is a very dangerous place for small businesses to, they got to almost have to decide if they're going to be in or out. And that's why we brought this topic. The other thing is, it's pass fail. If you fail, you've lost your investment because you're going to have to go all the way back, and you're going to have to go back to the end of the line and hope they can come do an audit later. So you will lose months of time, and you'll have to lose your reputation. The other thing is, you get hacked, and like you explained, 40% of small businesses are being hacked and 60% of those go bankrupt. Absolutely, that is a huge risk. In the federal contracting space, your reputation will be burned immediately. Because if you're in a small town like Huntsville, Alabama, where everybody knows everything, you're going to find the whisper network can destroy companies even when it's not valid so quickly, and you won't be able to get any work. So the other thing is, in my personal opinion, every contractor that I've been working with that's doing DoD work, IT, cyber, intel, professional services, any of that, I believe they're all going to have to be CMMC level 3 in order to be competitive, even if they weren't, because it's such a big issue. And that's where 1's not that bad, 2 is doable, but 3, that's a big kick. And there's a lot on that. But thank you so much, Veronica, for being on today. You brought up some amazing topics. And I feel like this is something where the reason we put this together at GovCon Summit is I wanted to get as much information as I could from a variety of different sources, because this needs to be an ongoing discussion, or it will destroy the defense industrial base. And people will say, no, you're crazy, but I've seen it happen before. There's so many threats to small business, whether it's contract bundling, whether it's everything's on IDIQ and there's no small business work, whatever it is. It's a very, it's one of those situations where we're really at a tipping point, and I want to see more companies succeed. And they're going to have to spend some money to do it. I think the other thing I wanted to mention is, people were asking me early on, what is this going to take? And in early things, Katie Arrington actually said at one point, it only costs $300. No, it'll cost $300 an hour for 240 hours. That is a ton of money. And small business, I'm not an expert in everything. You definitely have to be working with companies that have credentials, that care about the industry, that know what they're doing, and really be comparative, because there's a lot of companies out there saying we'll get you compliant, but they have no idea what defense requirements are, and they certainly don't care, because a lot of consultants, all I want to do is get paid, and it doesn't matter to me whether I deliver. So thank you so much, Veronica.
And just as another note too, is that if you guys have any questions, like I said, feel free to call me. If you need a consultant that you're like, hey, I literally don't know anything about any of this, I need help. I know a plethora of consultants that are really qualified in this area that have been vetted by experts. So if Nudge it's a great tool. I love everybody in the entire country to use it. However, the harsh reality is that not everyone has the capabilities to use the tool because they don't have the IT in-house. So if you need help, call me. I know people I can refer you to, because again, this is about getting everyone to compliance. I offer a solution. I love everyone to use it, but if you can't, we're still going to find you an opportunity to get to compliance.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. And everybody that's part of this group, it has that attitude. It's like we've all got to work together to support small business in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I got one question. Paul Cummings is a veteran, gotten out of the Army, and he is separating now. And he wrote this comment about, I can't afford to get the training for CMMC. I just wanted to throw that out there. I'm not exactly sure what he's talking about. He's hosting a session this afternoon for veterans talking about breaking into IT and cyber. And he's identifying for me some of the issues. So as we're going forward, I'm also looking for, how do we solve the workforce side of it? And oh, by the way, Paul is not Army, he's Navy. So Anitria, did you have any questions? Unmute real quick, and then we're gonna have to wrap up. You'll be our last question.
And Paul, just to comment, one, thank you for your service, but also, yes, that's 100% true. The qualifications for CMMC is quite expensive. It's a huge investment. Use that to your advantage. If you know the information and you can accurately get someone to compliance, well, I shouldn't say that, but making the investment is not 100% necessary. You can compete in this space by not having these certifications, because you are going to be able to show, I can get you to compliance. And the second you have a client that gets through an audit and passes, you're going to have a line of people coming to your door saying, hey, I hear your rates are really great because you don't have to charge all this overhead for all these certifications that you have. And I heard you got my friend to compliance. So use that to your advantage.
Okay, so Anitria, go ahead.
Really quickly, being a small business, we support a federal agency. We provide audit readiness support. So I have a prime contractor who I'm partnering with. So we're up for recompete. And I was truly asked about CMMC and, where we were. And so, that is something for me to think about. I've been attending multiple presentations about it. So, but being as though CMMC is not available right now, I guess the industry is preparing for it. Would it be, I guess, more cost efficient to sort of look at the NIST because it is available at this point? And so I would also be interested in working with, my prime contracting partner to sort of help with that, because it would be a flow down.
Mm-hmm. Right. So with NIST and CMMC, there's so much overlap. And that's one of the key reasons why Nudge was so useful, because you could get to NIST compliance and document all of that. And then simultaneously, you're documenting your CMMC compliance. So that's why Nudge is a really great tool, because it does save you a lot of time and money in the long run. But using what you have today for CMMC is going to be valid. So there's nothing, if you're going for a level 3, the requirements are pretty much set. So definitely take advantage of that, the time that there is now, because when the auditors are supposed to be certified is roughly the November timeframe. So you have between now and November to get your stuff in a row so that you can be the first in line to go for the certification papers. So if you use NIST today to get to that roadmap for CMMC, there's nothing wrong with that. You're going to look at mostly the same requirements. You're going to look at, okay, I'm going to put this information in a gap assessment, which is typically the first step in a CMMC certification if you don't do the readiness assessment. Then you're going to put it all into a POAM, which is a great way to organize your information and get you to the CMMC framework. And then that information that's in your NIST SSP can then be transferred over to your CMMC SSP, your system security plan. So there is a ton of overlap. There's a ton of value in seeing that. Your key to success really is going to be those guidelines to ensure that you're meeting those objectives. That's going to be the key piece there. So if, you guys can frame it any way you want, but CMMC level 3 is ready to go.
Okay, thanks so much, Veronica.